Good afternoon and welcome to Roy Talks. This afternoon, we're going to be having a conversation with Chaz O'Neil and Tanya Long. They'll talk a little bit about their work and Roy's part in their trajectory of their careers. If you have questions, feel free to post them in the chat and we'll monitor that and pick up on those for the artists to answer them. I want to be sure to thank the sponsors of conversations like this, and also Roy's mission really is supported by the Ohio Arts Council, the Greater Columbus Arts Council, the Columbus Foundation, the Encova Insurance Foundation. Without their generous support, events like this would not be possible. So shout out to them. Please support the entities that support the arts. So my name is Lynette Santoro, and I'm the director here at Roy G. Biv Gallery. And today's conversation is just that, a conversation with the artist whose work is currently on view here until October 2nd. And if we want to go ahead and get started with introductions, I think, right? So Tanya, do you mind going first?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me okay and everything? Okay.
Yes.
I'm Tanya Long. I'm one of the artists in the show. Mainly do ceramic work. I've been working with ceramics for about 10 years. So I got a BFA from Pratt in ceramics and an MFA from Cranbrook in Michigan in ceramics. That's just a little bit about my background. I'm really excited. I've been living in Ohio for 3 years, and this is my first big show of my work in Ohio. And I'm excited that it's at Roy. Yeah.
Great. Where did you, I don't know, where did you come from that brought you to Ohio?
Yeah, I started teaching at the University of Akron. And so that's the position I've held for the last 3 years in Ohio. So I live in Cleveland right now.
Great. Thank you. Chaz?
Hi there, everyone. My name is Jaz O'Neil. I am originally from Columbus, and I'll primarily make mixed media work, collages, photo-based collage work, along with paintings and drawings. Definitely going more in the installation realm of my work kind of lately. I am currently at Otterbein University, which is I teach foundations drawing courses, and I also am the museum and gallery technician there. Prior to that, I spent before COVID, I spent the last 15 years as the assistant director at the Ohio State Fair Fine Arts Exhibition. There I got to meet many Ohio artists and make a lot of great connections, including Lynette over the years. And I just want to thank many of the sponsors for this exhibition, including one from my personal work. I was recently granted a individual artist grant from the Greater Columbus Arts Council, which helped pay for and produce all the materials in this exhibition. So thank you to the Greater Columbus Arts Council.
Yeah, we love that. Greater Columbus Arts Council is amazing in terms of support. Most recently, they've been doing a passport. So the idea is that you get a passport for the months of September and October and visit different art sites around Columbus. You'll get a sticker made by local artists, and it encourages you to see other creative spaces. So I love their ingenuity and their support of local artists. I think that's really wonderful. Roy, of course, is a juried space for emerging artists. And so artists apply to have exhibitions here. And so the work that you all applied with, you did so in 2020 for a 2021 exhibition. So can you talk a little bit about your work then and your work now and what has influenced the evolution of that work? And Chaz, if you don't mind going first.
Sure. So this body of work really took off after the 2020 Greater Columbus exhibition that I was a part of at the Columbus Museum of Art last year, which was supposed to happen in 2019, but due to COVID was kind of pushed ahead. So that show I was invited to after my Dresden exchange program residency. So I spent 2 months in Dresden, Germany at the end of 2019 on an artist residency through the Greater Columbus Arts Council. So thank you again. And so, yes. So when I was in Dresden, I made a mural-based work in my studio. That was kind of my exhibition opportunity there. I also traveled around and got to see all kinds of fantastic museums and just parks, and just a lot of great hiking, a lot of great cities like Berlin, Leipzig, went to Prague, did a little bit of that traveling over there. And one of the best things I saw was the Terra Mineral, which was a mineral museum in Freiburg, Germany. And when I was there, I was able to take extreme close-ups, photograph close-ups of these fantastic minerals and geodes and even meteorite specimens. And so I took those photographs and sat on them for a while, stewed on them for many months. And then I started to play with them in Photoshop and started to alter the colors, put them together in kind of a kaleidoscope fashion. So the works behind me and around the outside over here, the base layer image is a photograph of a mineral, a geode, that's printed on a large scale printer on vinyl, which is a sticky adhesive sheet of paper. So they are entirely one sheet of vinyl. That's all printed, and then I paint on top of the actual photograph, and then I collage on top the reflective vinyl mylar that you see. So in a way, the works are about the compression, the tectonic movements that make those things visualized in a 2D plane. So there is chance and happenstance. Also, there is laws of nature, like the grid, and that also play a factor in the process. So.
Interesting. Very interesting. I'm kind of curious, this will be a question later, but how access to materials and also the pandemic has, influenced the work that you're going to be making moving forward. So Tanya, can you talk a little bit about your journey and the work that you had submitted, and then the work that you're showing now? In fact, so new that we took photographs in the gallery space. We didn't even have photographs before the work was installed, which is really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I always like the challenge of making something new to put into a new space. So a lot of what I'm making now is still growing out of the time I spent living in Hungary. So I was awarded a Fulbright in 2017, 2018. So I ended up being there for almost a full year, 11 months living in Hungary, and came back in 2018. And started teaching. So my work is grown out of the experience of living there and observing, really when I was there, observing the architecture and the layered landscape of the architecture there. So it's mixes of kind of like the really decorative, colorful, elaborate Art Nouveau on the exteriors and interiors of buildings, but then there's also the very kind of sharply delineated kind of brutalist style as well, from the middle of the last century, and kind of how those all are layered together across the cities in Hungary and kind of around Hungary and Eastern Europe. And then, so I'm kind of pulling from colors from one and then the form from other styles, and thinking about those layered histories and both interiors and exteriors of the built environment. And then I've found that over the past year and a half, specifically kind of tuning in more to the interiors naturally, just because there's much less opportunity to travel and move about and observe different architectural landscapes in that way. And just thinking about kind of, the homes that you inhabit, maybe whether you're renting or you're buying a home, that there's all kind of tiny details and larger details and decisions that were made 100 years ago or 50 years ago, and how all these decisions come together to make the environment you live in, and then what you do to the environment too, to kind of mold it and shape it and make it your own, and how that might then become the environment that someone else inhabits at some point. And then technically too, I've been developing, so I make my own glazes for all my ceramic work. So I've been kind of fine tuning the technical side of that and figuring out, a new color palette and kind of glaze surface texture, and kind of leaning more into what you see in the gallery is kind of semi-gloss, very opaque glaze that covers the piece consistently. Yeah. And in general, there's some installation work in the gallery, but also exploring smaller objects as well in the past year, 2 years. Yeah.
Sorry about that technical. I'm trying to mute and unmute myself because Chaz is in the gallery with me. And so I'm trying to not have an echo. So apologies. I'll get better at this, I swear. That is very interesting because the work that you both contributed is influenced by, of course, your experiences abroad and travel and, observation. I think the jurors really picked up on that when they put your work together. So I'm seeing some, crossovers, some intersectionality. I'm seeing how some of Chaz's work amplifies Tanya's work and vice versa. I wonder if you all could talk to that a little bit about your coming together and making the choices that you did for the works that you installed in the space.
So we had originally planned that I was going to do, my original plan was that I was going to do one of these big mural pieces, like I did at the CMA last year. And that was a feat that I don't know if I want to do twice in a matter of, 2.5 or 1.5 years. So I decided to scale it down. I knew this was kind of a smaller space, a little more intimate. And I wanted to simplify things to just make the work a little more concise, a little more thoughtful, and not to be so, because we only have like a week to install, like 4 days. And I didn't want to come up with any major surprises as far as installing a big piece like that, whether it would, whether I can pull it off or not, or so making standalone pieces like 4x4 panels I did was I think a better option than the big mural piece. We didn't want to overshadow and didn't want to make anything too loud that was over Tanya's work, which Tanya's work is very I'd say a little more quiet than mine. Definitely has a softer tone to it. So I thought that those two things would have clashed a little much. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think that change helped us navigate the space and make final decisions when we were installing, so that we could have kind of one area where we kind of, the work is next to each other. There's one space where there's an opportunity to view Chaz's work and mine a little bit in conversation with each other as well. Yeah.
I just changed my background so that you can sort of see how that how the work complements each other. This is an image that we're using, in social media and on our website. And I just love how the colors are sort of coming together and the shapes as well. So it's really very interesting. Kudos to our jurors who have a wonderful eye for, combining artwork. So that's great. And it's always very interesting, of course, to see how artists interpret the space and how Roy can be, a different kind of space depending on what artists need. We have walls that move around. We have the ability to sort of manipulate the space. But, each month I'm amazed at how you all see the space, because of course I see it every day. So it's really great to see that and have that dialogue with you too. So I appreciate that very much. What was something that you got out of this exhibition, like your favorite part of developing the show, or something that you learned about yourself or your own artwork while you were installing? Can you talk a little bit about that and the influence of, showing with each other, but also the influence of the space and the choices that you made?
Tanya, you want to go first?
Sure. So, I mean, in the process of installing in a new space is always helpful to see work in a different way. Like, I think I initially visualized the pieces that are on the floor to be out in the space more, and finding that I actually like the pieces more to be kind of anchored visually with work that was installed on the wall. So kind of finding out that benefits both pieces in a way, when I can anchor them together in the same kind of nook or near the same wall space. So that's always, it's nice to be able to photograph multiple pieces together, and seeing it all kind of holistically, instead of, when you're making each ceramic part, you're very in tune with just the one piece and thing that is in front of you. And of course, you're always trying to capture that one piece, but being able to see it all together helps me think about going forward and what I might make next as well.
Yeah, I know some of the times those are interesting conversations that I have with artists, because you work in a variety of places. And we've had some artists who work on a larger scale and they have never seen their work installed on a wall, right? It's always been on the floor when they've been working on it, or a work table or something. And you're right, once you start to see it and the dialogue between the pieces, then there was some editing involved as well, right? Some things that were on the list didn't make the cut into the gallery. It's a very strong show visually. And the choices that you made certainly made the work stronger, so that we're not distracted by a green table or, some of the other choices that you made. So that's very interesting. Yeah. Chaz, go ahead.
Yeah, I often I purposely made more work than I would, was going to plan to show. So I only really edited out one larger piece. And then Tanya and I had the question about the little nook over here, who would kind of take that space, and then we kind of came to a decision about each one of us would have a piece there, and they actually complement each other very well. We had to talk about which piece we would choose for the little bench. And the blues and the pinks and kind of that pastel color that she has in her work is evident in the piece that's next to hers, the one that's next to Lynette's head over there. I noticed that Tanya uses the wall space more than I do. There's definitely more breathing room between her works, and I tend to do more chaotic installations where there's cram as much as I can. But coming to the drawings, that's something. There's 2 4-foot by 4-foot drawings on the walls here that I did, intentional for this space, and each one took roughly 5 to 6 hours to create. And those are, I think, my quiet spaces in this exhibition. Yeah. We can talk more about those if you want.
Yeah, I mean, certainly go ahead. We posted on our social media a virtual tour of the space. We have a very talented and diverse group of interns with a variety of talents, none of which I also have. So it's wonderful to take advantage of those opportunities, but put something together with some music and post it on social media. So we are including, all the images from the exhibition. So hopefully people can come here in person. The work's on view until October 2, but that's like a little teaser that we posted, and the drawings are in that. And so the drawings were a source of conversation last night at our opening Franklinton Fridays with some of the viewers that came into the space. So I know it was very interesting for them to picture, what people bring to the exhibition and what they see is one thing, but then when it's explained what the work actually is, that's a whole nother opportunity for a conversation. So those pieces that are otherworldly, right, but looked very much like a landscape here on Earth. So yeah, this is a good time. Go ahead and talk a little bit about those sketches, drawings.
Yeah. So they are inspired by the two of the Mars robotic rovers that are on the planet right now. The first one I chose was Perseverance, and I picked an image from one of their gallery of photographs from the NASA the website, and just kind of was inspired by one of the mountain ranges there, and kind of started with the main features of that landscape, and then kind of just it took a life of its own on after that. So it's a little more improv after the kind of the main image. And the second one is Curiosity, which is an older robot that's currently on Mars, but still working since 2012. I believe it landed there. And I've always been fascinated with drawing these lunar landscapes, these deserted landscapes. Even in my MFA program, one of my large scale installations was a drawing that was 18 inches tall by 130 feet long. And I installed that in one of our gallery spaces for my MFA thesis show. And it was great to come back to a large scale project drawing like that. I haven't done that since then, so that was 2013. It's one of those things where I take a risk, and I don't know if it's going to work because I've never drawn directly on a painted wall before, but I think it worked well, so I'm pretty happy with the results.
Yeah, it is interesting because your work is very available, pieces that are created on boards that are installed on the wall that can be easily removed. Pieces that are somewhat accessible, the clings that we will have to pull off the wall to put on a sheet to give to a buyer, and then pieces that are not transferable at all, the drawings. So yeah, can you talk a little bit about the choices of those? Because one of the great things about Roy is that it's an it's an experimental place. It's a safe place for artists to explore. When we sell art, we love it because that's wonderful. However, it's not the main goal. So artists are able to think about work and challenging mediums and pushing boundaries of things and materials rather than just what can be sold and what cannot be sold, right? So it's interesting, those choices that you make. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then Tanya, the same question to you.
Yeah, so the permanence of this piece is not, it's not long for this world. It will come down in a few weeks, and I'm okay with that. I spent hours and hours on these drawings, and I'm really appreciative of the people who come and see them before they disappear. And we'll have photographic records, and I even made a video, a time-lapse video of myself creating these drawings. So there's a record of that as well. But I have hundreds and hundreds of drawings at home in my studio, and I don't think I have a room for any more of these. So I'll be happy when it's cleaned or washed away or whatever we decide to do with it. But yeah, I'm okay with that. That fugitive aspect of these pieces.
Tanya, you're working in a medium that lasts a very long time. When we, excavate cultural spaces, we find pottery, right? It's one of the earliest forms. So in contrast to the things that Chaz is working on too, that's really an interesting dichotomy that you have.
Yeah, definitely. The way that I try and do something similar, I guess, to what Chaz is doing is by always trying to make more expansive installations with the ceramic, like the piece that's behind you in the image now, and then there's another one to the side that's all black and also has multiple parts that come together to make something more expansive, that isn't kind of as straightforward as just one compact piece on the wall or on a pedestal. Kind of just seeing how ceramic can be put together differently in that way.
Yeah, I'm struck by that and your particular piece that is, I'm assuming created either for this space or for another, but fits into the corner of the space. So you really are playing with the space and its architecture in creating that, the yellow piece that's in the corner.
Right. Yes. The yellow piece and the pink stacked shelves. There's another corner piece that fits snugly. There's definitely thinking intentionally about, all the corners that are available in the gallery and how I can make something that, fits into those spaces as if it belongs there.
That's a really interesting choice to make, especially because we don't think about ceramics as something that is fitting into a space, right? But rather inhabits a space, whereas placed in a space, as opposed to being part of the architecture of that space. So that's it's really interesting too. That's it. I mean, and again, that's a great thing about Roy and the artists who exhibit here, emerging artists who are trying all kinds of, ways to inhabit space and to create work and to exhibit it. So yeah, very interesting. And we talked a little bit about this, but I wanted to go back to it if you don't mind. The part that Roy is playing then in this journey of yours as artist, what are some of the things that you learned about your work when you were installing in the space that will help inform you moving forward?
I don't know who wants. So for me, it's always the scale, the ultimate scale of the piece. You were talking before about other artists also that, you're laying something out on a floor or a large table and you kind of have a sense, and maybe it's maximizing your studio space that you have and it feels very big, but then of course you put it into a space that's much bigger than anything that it's been in before, and just realizing how quickly that scale shifts once it's all up. So it's nice to know that you can go bigger, I guess, once you have the opportunity to install one piece, knowing kind of how much you can shift your scale and to get the end result that you want in another piece. So that is absolutely helpful because it's not something that's available all the time to me right now, is the opportunity to put it up and really get a sense of especially the larger pieces and be encouraged to push that bigger and in different directions.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things I learned is how to be resourceful, especially during pandemic lockdown times. But when I was in Spain and Germany for those 3 months in 2019, working in a studio space, being in a country where I didn't necessarily speak the native language, how do I come across materials? How do I find things? How do I get around the city? How do I bring them back to my studio and make things with it? That taught me a lot about how to be resourceful and how to use the resources available to me. For instance, applying for the GCAC grant that I was just awarded, and using those opportunities to my advantage. And even at Otterbein University, which is where I currently work, we have a maker space there, which is where most of the stuff was made. The printing happened there, the cutting of the vinyl happened there, building the frames for the mounted pieces happened there. So, and that's really, and it was actually a short amount of time. I didn't start actually making the work probably till mid-July was actually I started producing the actual, printing the photographs and painting them and then adhering all the little hundreds and hundreds of pieces of vinyl to them. And then just kind of, problem solving when you're actually physically installing in this space, which is something I always love since I'm a gallery installer by trade. So I always enjoy that.
That's great. You're going to certainly use those skills when we are addressing the pencil sketches on the wall and how those are going. Yes, how we're going to remove those. So good. Okay, so this is an opportunity for you to talk about what's next. What after Roy, do you have a show coming up? Do you have something that you're working on? I don't know if we're traveling again or not, but talk a little bit about what's next for you both.
So I really don't have much planned for the rest of the year as far as the work goes. This was kind of the big thing for me this year. And I'm very happy with the result. And I'm moving to a new studio space even as we speak. My wife and I just bought our first house. So we're moving on top of all this happening. So it's yeah, I've been blessed and it's been awesome. And so I'm looking forward to the new space and see what I can create there. Maybe I'll get back into applying for more juried shows. I kind of held off on that for a while because of the Greater Columbus show at the museum. That took a lot of my studio time, and then preparing for this show this year. So that took a lot of my time. So let's try my hand back into the juried show pool.
That's good. I know, we have conversations with artists all the time about shows that didn't take place because of the pandemic or a change in the calendar and things were bumped or moved around. And, artists who prepared work for specific spaces that then didn't get to show it. And then what happens to that work? Is it adaptable to a new space, or, did you just move on from there or what? So I'm, as your work changes and your view changes and your, influences change, then do you still show that old work or not? Right? I don't know. It's like, musicians, they don't want to play the old songs from the very first album, right? You're moving on with your artwork.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to reflecting on what the work that just went up and thinking about how to grow from this exhibition. Don't have anything currently on the timeline, but I'm really grateful to have the work up and be able to think and reflect. And I was just able to purchase my own small kiln for my ceramic. So a lot of ceramicists tend to end up sharing space with other ceramicists because the equipment is, it requires such, special space to put it and to function and, to fill it also if you're working that way. So I'm excited to use that to push some more of my glazes in different directions and kind of take time to experiment and kind of open up my options for that as I reflect on what I've put up, so that I can kind of be continuously moving forward with that as well and exploring new directions that can take in tandem with kind of sketching new ideas, planning for the next thing.
I was going to ask that about your process. Is that something that you do, sketch and plan things out, or you work from photographs, or but sketching? Yeah.
Yeah. Like reading and researching broadly, and then sketching and resketching things. Like that piece behind you, I sketched it at least a dozen different ways to land on what I ultimately went with. And then I often, I settle on something, and then I make a template so that I can really transfer and make that sketch come to life in the ceramic form the way that I want it to. So definitely more of a planner, planning and executing something when it comes to ceramics.
Great. Well, I want to give people who are attending this conversation a moment to ask any questions that they might have. You feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question, or put it in the chat and we'll catch up with it. And while you're thinking about that, then in the meantime, we had a little conversation amongst ourselves earlier that produced an article that posted in Columbus Underground on Thursday. So we got to know a little bit about you and your process, and also like what you listen to that helps inform when you create podcasts and music and whatnot. So that was very interesting. What is your process for creating? In other words, you're sketching, you're having ideas that you put together, you get into the studio. Do you work on your own? Do you get feedback from others? Do you work in groups or have a critique group? Roy has started a critique group here on the third Thursday of the month. And so I'm always just very curious about artists. And because when you are creating in school, you have all kinds of people to help bounce ideas off of or whatever. Once you're out of school and you're creating on your own, how do you keep yourself moving forward? Who helps you make those kinds of decisions? Maybe talk a little bit about your process, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. So I bounce a lot of my ideas off primarily as my wife, Margarita. She's also an artist, a fiber artist, and previously a painting, drawing artist. That's what she was kind of trained in. Then I, of course, give her a lot of feedback on her work as well. And so that's kind of my go-to person. Other colleagues at the university who know my work pretty well, even because I'm a graduate Otterbein. So some of my colleagues there were my teachers when I was there. So they have seen me grow and come up for many years. So it's great to talk to them about what I'm doing today. I think what was the other part of your question? I'm sorry.
Oh, just that about, like how you talked about it a little bit, sketching and coming up with ideas and things, but then also like what helps you inform your decisions. And, even as much as you were saying earlier, you had edited a piece out, but what helped you to inform that, right? Like it filled the space, it overfilled the space, it didn't help you with the narrative that you were trying to create, or, how are those decisions made?
Yeah, there was a piece that we edited out because it was just almost it was overdoing it in a way. So I definitely want to be more thoughtful when it comes to those decisions moving forward. In a way, less is more. And I always have to rein myself back. I'm definitely messy. If you ever walk into my studio, you would know why I'm making tons of work and I want to show it all, but it's not all that turns out. So that one piece that didn't make it in wasn't my favorite, but even in the Messenger series, which is an older series of work that I'm still working on, but there are probably roughly 40 of those panels all together. And I've sold a few of them here and there, but I would say only about 1 out of 4 really make it to see the world, to the website, and jazoneil.com. And the other ones just kind of get stored away.
Thus the need for a new, bigger house and a bigger studio.
Yeah, so I talked a little bit about my process just before. Definitely a lot of sketching, really quick, rough sketches, and I try to always sketch it down. So even just the smallest idea, I put it in there, and I will go back and flip through a sketchbook and find something that I almost nearly completely forgot about, and then I'll revisit it and resketch it and rework through the idea to find something that I want to build out as a form. I definitely also, I will ask my partner all the time, you know, what do you think of this or that? But mostly I'm working solitary, so I'm just kind of thinking through things on my own. And I have the BFA and an MFA, and the master's program I attended was entirely based around studio time and critiques. So Cranbrook Academy of Art is kind of unique in that way. So I feel like I still have all of those voices and those questions that were asked, not just in my own critiques, but in critiques of others' work, because we did so many when I was there, that those little voices kind of pop up as I'm working, and then it helps me question myself and my decisions and decide what I want to do. So that is definitely helpful as well. Yeah, and it's also really nice to just meet people. So when an exhibition is up, and just kind of knowing people's first reaction to something that you've looked at for so long, maybe a year or 2 years or longer. Just kind of getting to know people's gut reaction when they walk up to something too, and then using that as a way to think about your own work as you move forward.
That's great. I'm not a maker myself. I think my artistic abilities are in creating opportunities for other artists, and certainly some in curation. But it's very, I mean, I think you all are so brave. It's very challenging, I have to believe, to work so hard and so long on a piece and then hear reactions from people. So that's great that it helps inform you and helps you grow as an artist also. I mean, that's what critiques are for. That's what feedback is for. So it's good that those things that you find to be valuable to you. So we'll be trying to keep these conversations to 45 minutes, an hour or so. So we're kind of coming up on that time. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't cover? Any questions that you had for each other, or something about the space itself, or your own work, something that I didn't ask that you'd like to talk about?
Sure. Tanya, I would like to ask about the functionality of your work. Like, I know it's when we think of ceramics, we all sometimes we think of bowls and cups and thrown wheel objects. But some of your work kind of resembles furniture in a way. You mentioned that you kind of have those influences from those decorational periods of time there, and you have like the blue stool and the shelf and the other little like two-legged stand. They're not meant to be used as a functional piece, but could you talk a little bit about that, about how someone sees that, but sees them as a functional object, but it's not really intended to be used that way?
Yeah, I definitely like kind of being right on that line between functional, non-functional. I think that's kind of, from what I've observed of others' work as well, that's kind of the direction that things are going, like kind of tending less to kind of want to just strictly separate fine art and function, which has often been the case with ceramics. Like for a long time, ceramics was not something that was even like exhibited regularly because it was craft or functional. So I like in my work for it to not be strictly one or the other. Like if someone wants to get the table and put the table in a space and use the table, that's not something that I think that's okay, and I think that's good, and I think it's good, yeah, to not always delineate between one or the other, and to be able to be both things in one space. I'm thinking.
Do we lose her? Are you still there, Tanya? Oh, yeah.
I'm here.
Oh, that's fine. I'm sorry.
Yes.
I thought you were trying to say something and maybe we had lost the audio or something, but
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
good. Yeah. Well,
Okay.
great. Well,
Yeah.
go ahead. The exhibition is on view here at Roy until October 2nd. And as I mentioned, we recorded this conversation, so we're going to post it on our YouTube channel when it becomes available to us. And I'm hoping that artists will agree to take over our Instagram at some point during the month so we can get some behind the scenes tours maybe of your studio and your space. And I'm very curious about how you creating these wonderful glazed colors and, sort of like where the influence and the motivation for those colors comes from, because they are so very rich, but also so very subtle, which is an interesting combination, I think. The yellows are just stunning. So I'm looking forward to learning a little bit more about that. Okay, well, thank you both so much for this conversation. Any last minute things that you want to say that we didn't cover?
Thank you again for the opportunity to show my work in the space. Yeah, it's been a really great process leading up to it and installing it and having the opening and having the work up for the next couple weeks.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, Roy is certainly happy to be a part of your journey as an artist. And so we'll look forward to learning a little bit more about you and the work that you create. Okay, so thank you all so much. We'll close for now and look forward to seeing the work in person.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.